Alright guys, well it's Christmas Eve, but I'm sure you're watching this after Christmas. Hope yours was fun. I made a decision yesterday that is going to turn out to be either brilliant or incredibly stupid. I bought a truck sight unseen from Copart. It is a 2005 Dodge 2500 diesel. Only has 142,000 miles, but because it's a Copart, it is salvaged, of course. Now the salvage is due to water/flood damage, and I have no idea what that means. Now I've bought more than a couple vehicles from Copart where it says that they do not run and it's just a battery, or the vehicle runs just fine immediately. So I'm hopeful that there was no water that made its way into the engine or the transmission or the axles, but you never know. My thought process is that the best case scenario is that I get a fantastic low mileage awesome diesel truck for a great price. The worst case scenario is that the engine is hydrolocked and I've got a giant paperweight. So it's basically a lottery ticket. And I paid $3,400 auction price for it, but after all their fees, it was $4,492 out the door. So $4,500 for a lottery ticket. Well, it's been an hour on Christmas Eve in the parking lot, waiting. Still waiting. The longest I've had to wait for a vehicle here was 2 hours and 41 minutes. Just for a forklift to go pick it up. And we're not allowed inside, so you have to just sit out here and wait and hope they don't forget about you and hope they don't take a lunch break in the middle of it. So, still waiting. Alrighty, here it is. Woo! She is heavy! Alright, I've got it all loaded up. I'm not thrilled with it. I'm gonna take surface streets the way home because I knew the motor was super heavy, but the truck's only supposed to weigh 6,200 to 6,500 pounds from what I'm reading online. This truck is rated at around 8,000 pounds. The trailer is about 1,800 pounds, give or take, so it's going to be very close. The front of the truck is so heavy because of that heavy Cummins motor that I had to kind of scoot it back as far as it could go, and everything is just right at the limits. My tires, the trailer axles, everything. So surface streets on the way home and pray that nothing goes wrong. So I just reset my fuel trip meter. Let's see what kind of mileage we get on the way home. Alright guys, as you can see, I got it here. It was sketchy to say the least. I was right at the maximum weight that this could carry. I was right at the maximum weight for these axles, right at the maximum weight for all these tires, and it was sitting pretty low. So I ended up taking side streets instead of the freeway to get it home. I had to go immediately to my sister's house for a Christmas Eve lunch, and I just got back. I've got 15 minutes before my father-in-law shows up, so I want to at least check the fluids on this thing because otherwise I won't be able to think about anything else. So I'm gonna pop the hood, check the fluids. I don't see any sign of any water damage anywhere so far. So I'm trying to not get ahead of myself, but I'm excited. So if you see, this is a Utah title is on this, and I don't see any rust anywhere. This thing looks really well taken care of. Here's what it's like on the inside. And then up here. Now the batteries are totally dead. And sometimes, if we're really lucky, it's because it's a diesel, so of course it has two batteries, and when they hook up a jump box to them, it's possible that this thing runs and drives just fine, and that they just weren't able to test it out with the jump box, either because they were lazy or because the jump box didn't have enough juice for a diesel. So let's check the fluids, first things first, and then I'll have to put a pause on it for Christmas dinner. So let me do that. Like diesel. Look at that. but that's about normal. Obviously you get a lot of soot. I'll be sending in this oil sample to Blackstone Labs and have them send me back their little list of what's in it. Let's see. It's tough to say, but it looks like there certainly could be some water in the transmission fluid. It's looking milkshakey, so might have something there. All right. Sadly, I have to wait until after dinner to come back out here, but at least we know there's no water in the engine. All right, guys, it's Christmas Day. Well, Christmas evening, as you can see. But the kids are either sleeping or playing with their new toy robot, so I was able to get her off of the old trailer here. And I'm starting to do some detective work to try and figure out what's going on with this vehicle. I haven't pulled a Carfax, so I don't know a ton about it yet. You can see it was originally sold in Indiana. As far as I can tell, I've crawled all around this, and there is practically no rust. If I were to guess, I would have guessed, you know, Arizona or Utah, which is where the title is from, Nevada, something like that. So the title is Utah. The mileage, like I said, was 142. The sticker here for the Jiffy Lube shows it was last serviced almost exactly a year ago, and then it says the next oil change is due at 147, 5,000 miles ahead of where it's at now. I'm not sure what the duration is that Jiffy Lube recommends for these, but I would imagine because it's this diesel that it's probably a 6,000 mile oil change, so it probably only has 1,000 miles on the oil. But because you never know, I certainly will change that. The pickup date here from Allstate Insurance shows that it was picked up on 8/12. So it's Christmas Day now, so that's a few months back. So this thing's been sitting for a while, which explains why the batteries are dead. But from what I can tell, without the Carfax, it's, you know, harder to know. But this seat, this looks about right for 142,000 miles. Once they get 160 to 200, these all start to tear, or at least start to wear pretty bad. That's pretty common. So I do think it's an original miles. Now this truck here, really what's valuable about this truck, we all know, is just the motor. The 5.9, this is the last generation of the 5.9. After this generation, they switched to the 6.7, so this is the last one that was non-emissions other than the particulate filter, and it is a 610 pound torque, so it's a super desirable setup. And then it's the four-wheel drive, of course, which is valuable. So because it's never been in an accident, at least as far as I can tell, and the axles are valuable, the engine's valuable, the transmission, those aren't too expensive. So that's what I really want to make sure that I protect when I get this thing going. All right, guys, it is the day after Christmas, so all of the stores are open, so hopefully I'll be able to track down any parts that I need for this. I have a charger hooked up to it overnight. I do not expect either of these batteries to be good. From my experience, once a battery is fully drained, it's really hard to bring it back, and these have been fully drained for at least a few months. So I'm expecting 2 new batteries. What I would normally do if this was a gas-powered motor is I would normally pull the spark plugs out, crank it over a few times by hand, make sure there's no water damage inside the cylinders so that we don't hydro lock it when we attempt to start it. But there is no bolt on the front of the crank like what I'm used to. It has 3 bolts for the crank pulley, so it's a little bit difficult to spin it around by hand. Also, I cannot release the compression by pulling off spark plugs because there aren't any, and neither are there any glow plugs, so I can't pull off any glow plugs. And it is a common rail injection system, so I can't pull off the injectors. So there's no easy way for me to release any of the compression that it's going to have on the motor when I start it. So I think I'm going to assume that any damage that's been done to this motor has already been done, and attempting to crank it over is not going to cause any further damage. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. The only thing that I've done before attempting to start it is I drained some fuel out of it just to make sure that there's no water in it. There was no water in it. Alrighty, very nervous, you guys. Let's see here. Alright, ready? Oh, nothing at all. Are we in park? She didn't even sound like she's trying. Let's see. Before I do the new batteries, I've got a 200 amp charger. I'll throw that on there. See if we can at least get a click, or at least get it to try. If that doesn't work, or if I put the new batteries in and it still doesn't work, then we certainly could have some type of an electrical gremlin, which would make sense for water damage. If the water got into the engine, even if everything was fine, it still could have destroyed one of the computers, and that might be our issue. So start at the getting more amps to it and go from there. All right, I got the starter charger hooked up. 200 amps going to it now. Let's see if we get anything different. Oh, nothing at all. All right, let's try and figure out. I think that should be enough amperage to try to force at least the solenoid to activate. So I should be hearing a click or like a from the starter, and I am getting just butkus. All right, I've got the fuse box off. What's very nice is that it actually tells you where they all go. Unfortunately, the Fords do not do that, and that can be very frustrating. So I checked all the fuses. Every single one of them is good. The main one I was looking at here is going to be the starter solenoid fuse. That's good. This here is the starter solenoid. I actually pulled off the starter solenoid and I'm not sure which one it is next to it. Let's see. It is the fuel heater relay. I pulled those off and switched them just to see. No change. If you take a look here, you can see the markings on them. So they're pretty well worn, but these appear to be fine. So the next thing I looked at, I didn't actually know that you could do this until I went online, but somebody was saying you turn the key into the run position and then off, and then run position and then off, and then run position, and then look at that. It tells you, it gives you the code. Now I was getting a P2509 as the only code. I briefly looked it up on my phone and it looks like it is a PCM/ECM some issue. So some type of an intermittent failure with the computer. Of course that makes perfect sense if this was in fact water damaged. So it could be, I'm not sure if that is the PCM on it, the one that's on the side of the motor. Again, I'm more used to Fords, so forgive me. The Fords nowadays are usually on top of the dash. They slide them in that way, then you can plug them in there. If they're not there, they're usually inside, tucked on the passenger side or the driver's side here. But I think that's the mammer jammer that we're looking at. No idea how expensive it is. Not exactly sure how to test it yet. First things first, I'm going to see if I can bypass the starter solenoid and at least get the engine to crank over to see if we have any internal issues there before I start just throwing money at this thing. All right, I've got the starter relay out. I'm going to jump it. So I'm going to bypass the starter relay, send the power directly from where the relay was to the starter solenoid. And we'll see if it starts up. I'll put the key in the on position inside the vehicle. All right, here we go. The key is on, the starter relay is out, and I'm going to bypass it now. Nothing. All right, I've got 2 new batteries, and I will see if it starts. Let's see. Still nothing. All right, keep going. At least we know the battery's good. All right. Check this out, I've got a voltage meter set up to show that when I start it, watch this, I'm getting voltage. Now this is power directly to the starter, and so obviously the starter's not cranking, so I think I'm gonna have to pull off the starter and bench test it. Alright guys, so I'm under here getting ready to pull the starter. Before I did that, I did pull off the transmission cover and I made sure that the motor turned, and it did turn with minimal effort. So at least we know that the motor's not hydro-locked. The next step here though, I just got to get the 3 bolts for the starter off, and then we'll bench test it. Alright, I tested it with the fancy machine here, and it is failing. The drive is not extending and it's not spinning at all, so I'm gonna get a new one. Alright guys, it is nighttime, in case you couldn't tell, and it is raining. So I was delayed by the rain because unfortunately I'm working on this thing outside because it was a little too heavy to get into the shop. Let's see if it works. Oh, I forgot to hook up the starter wire. All right, stay with me on this one. Run out in the rain and get this. I was like, oh man, not again. But I unhooked this right here. All right, so let's try this again. Alrighty. Alright, round two. Here we go. Come on. Put the keys here there. Alright. Come on, baby. Ugh. Well, that doesn't sound good. Whew. Well, I guess we keep going, maybe when it's not raining. All right, guys, as you can see, it is now morning time and the rain has subsided, at least for now. So I'm going to go ahead and give this thing another try at starting it up. It's a little bit cold, especially for here. It's 45 degrees. So those of you in the northern hemisphere are probably laughing at me right now, but that's cold for me. So it's going to be cold for this engine too, because it has sat for at least 6 months or so outside of trying to start it last night. So it's going to be a little bit hard on the motor. I've got this view angled up so that you can see. I imagine she's going to put out all kinds of smoke. So let me get it fired up and we'll see what she does. I've got my father-in-law inside, and then I've got a little can of ether here. So I'm going to give it just a little bump of a spray to see if we can get this thing fired up on its own. I do have, it doesn't have glow plugs, but I have the, it's the heating coil element for it. I have that unhooked so that we're not going to risk any fires there from the ether, so we should be good to go. But just a quick little bump, we'll just see if we can get it going. All right, go ahead. Whew. All right, hang on a sec. All right, go again. All right, so check this out. I was only getting that P2509 error code. 1, 2, 3, here it is. That's what I was getting before. Now, after that last attempt at starting, P0341. That is a camshaft positioning sensor failure. And then it says done. So, now I've got something else to try and figure out. Alright guys, that's it for this week. Sorry I couldn't get it running a little better for you. That was my goal. I wanted to have it nice and running and be pulled into this shop instead of the rain before this video was up, but you never know what you're going to get with these auction vehicles. Now there was one thing I did not film, and I probably should have, and that was addressing the P2509 code. I ended up following the factory recommendations for diagnosing that, and every single positive lead to the ECM was verified perfect, and the 3 ground leads were all perfect as well. It seems like that issue was because I had enough voltage from my jumper to let it recognize there was a problem, and then not enough to have it start. So once I put the new batteries in there, everything tested fine, so that's why I didn't seem too concerned about that. Now, if you're concerned that I'm a crazy person who bought a flood damaged vehicle, you're not wrong. There's a market for these, you know, somebody buys all these vehicles. Most people seem to be really concerned about flood damage. It doesn't bother me that much. I hear a lot of comments about, oh, down the line, the electrical systems, this, that, or the other. Maybe. Some vehicles are more prone for that. I wouldn't buy a flood damaged Camaro or a Corvette or something like that. Really, a lot of the sports cars, I wouldn't touch anything German that had any water anywhere near it. But something like this, you've got a watertight ECM that's mounted on the side of the motor that's made to survive in some of the harshest environments, and then you've got really basic electronics on the inside. So I'm just not that worried about it. Maybe I should be. I videotaped these pretty much live, so you guys are seeing them as they're happening, which is why you'll see me make mistakes, and then in a follow-up video I end up going back and fixing them. I could wait to release these and then only release the parts where I do everything correctly, but that doesn't seem like a lot of fun for anybody. So if you think I'm crazy, you're not alone. If you do know more about these vehicles than I do, I would love it if you are a Cummins expert and you're screaming at the screen right now telling me that I'm a dummy for not recognizing this, that, or the other. Let me know. I'm not an expert in Cummins by any means. I'm not probably an expert on any specific vehicle. I like to jump from vehicle to vehicle and try and just learn as much as I can rather than just getting stuck on doing the same thing over and over again. So for me, it's all about learning, and it's about just trying to figure things out and have fun. So I do plan on keeping this vehicle long term. I plan on having it replace my Ford, assuming I can get everything working on it okay. So anything you can do to help would be much obliged. So that's it. Hope you had a great holiday. Hope you have a great New Year's. I'll see you guys next week.